Philip stood in the middle of the dusty street, his suitcase by his side, his heart pounding in his chest. He had dreamed of this moment for 20 years, coming home to the warm embrace of his family, stepping into the grand house he had spent his entire youth working for. But as he knocked on the heavy wooden gate of his family's compound, something felt off. The gate opened slightly, and a young boy peeked out. Philip smiled. "Go and call my mother. Tell her Philip is home." The boy disappeared, but minutes passed, then hours. Philip's smile faded. He knocked again, this time harder. Finally, the gate opened, and there she was, his mother, older, frailer, but with no trace of joy on her face. She looked at him as if he were a stranger. "What do you want?" she asked coldly. Philip felt his heart shatter. "Mama, it's me, Philip, your son. You don't recognize me again? I sent money, so much money. I've come home." But instead of joy, she frowned. "Philip, don't cause trouble. Go back to wherever you came from." And just like that, the gate slammed in his face. He staggered back, his body trembling. How could this be happening? Where was his house? Where was his family? Why did they look at him like a madman? He turned, looking around, but there was nowhere to go. Nowhere at all. Could this happen to you? Would you survive such betrayal? Keep watching. The truth is more painful than you can imagine. Philip refused to believe it. Maybe his mother was confused. Maybe she didn't recognize him after so many years. He picked up his suitcase and walked to his younger brother's shop, the one he had sent money to for business. It was supposed to be a thriving business now, but as he approached, his stomach tightened. The shop was there, bigger than he had imagined, filled with goods. But inside, behind the counter, was his younger brother, Emeka, wearing gold chains, dressed like a man who had never known suffering. Philip felt relief. "Emeka!" he called out, stepping inside. His brother looked up, his eyes darkening. "Who are you?" Emeka asked. Philip chuckled nervously. "Stop playing. It's me, Philip. You don't recognize me again? I sent you money for this shop, for the house, for everything. I'm finally home." The silence was deafening. Then Emeka leaned forward, smirking. "Home? You mean our home? The one we built?" He laughed. "Philip, you've been gone too long. Maybe you should rest. You sound sick." Philip's heart clenched. "Emeka, where is my house? Where is my land? The money I sent?" His brother shrugged. "Money? What money?" Philip felt dizzy. His knees weakened. "You're joking, right?" he whispered. But Emeka just waved him away. "Go, before people start saying you have lost your mind. Imagine working all your life, only to come home and find out you have nothing. What would you do in Philip's shoes? Watch as his nightmare unfolds." Philip had not always dreamed of leaving Nigeria, but life had left him no choice. Born into a struggling family, he had known hunger like an unwanted companion. His father had died when he was just a boy, leaving his mother to raise 5 children alone. They lived in a small leaking house where rats shared their food and mosquitoes feasted on their skin at night. As the eldest, Philip felt the weight of responsibility early. He worked on farms, carried heavy loads at the market, and even shined shoes just to bring home a little money. But no matter how hard he worked, poverty held them captive. His younger siblings looked up to him, and his mother, though loving, reminded him daily that as the first son, it was his duty to change their fate. One day, he heard about opportunities abroad. Hard work, yes, but better pay. The only problem was the journey. It was dangerous and expensive. But Philip had already suffered enough. He sold everything he owned, borrowed money, and promised his mother, "I will go and return a rich man." The journey was worse than he imagined. He crossed deserts, slept in refugee camps, and nearly drowned on an overcrowded boat. Hunger burned in his stomach, and fear became his daily prayer partner. But he survived. When he finally reached Europe, he had nothing but the clothes on his back and the fire in his heart. He took the lowest jobs, washing dishes, cleaning streets, working in factories where they treated him like an animal. He endured racism, cold winters, and long nights of loneliness. But he never gave up. Every month he sent money home, sometimes denying himself food just to make sure his family never lacked. Now, after 20 years of sacrifice, he had returned home, expecting to be celebrated. But instead, he was being called mad. After all the suffering, is this what Philip deserved? Would you survive what he went through? Keep watching. His nightmare is just beginning. Philip's hands shook as he stood outside the house he had dreamed of for years, the house he had built from his sweat, the house his sister always described with pride. But as he stepped forward, he saw children playing in the yard, children he didn't recognize. Women sat on the veranda, gossiping. It didn't look like a house waiting for its owner. He took a deep breath and knocked. A man he had never seen before answered. "Yes?" Philip's voice wavered. I am looking for my sister. This is my house." The man's face twisted in confusion. "Your house?" He laughed. "Who are you?" Philip's stomach dropped. "I am Philip. I sent money to my family to build this house. This is my home." The laughter grew louder. A woman from inside called out, "Mad people are everywhere these days." Philip felt like he was losing his mind. "Where is my sister?" The man crossed his arms. "Listen, Philip, or whatever you call yourself, this house belongs to us. We bought it years ago from Amika. If you have a problem, go and meet him." Philip staggered back, his breath coming in gasps. His brother sold his house? His own blood? Tears blurred his vision. His whole life, his dreams, had been stolen. Can you imagine this level of betrayal? If you were Philip, what would you do? The truth is even more painful. Keep watching. Philip's legs felt weak as he walked back to his mother's house. The same house he had grown up in. The same house he had sent money to renovate so she could live comfortably. His mind raced. His own brother had sold his house. His family had taken everything from him. He refused to believe it. As he entered the compound, he saw his mother sitting outside, peeling cassava. His heart clenched. "Mama," he whispered, his voice shaking. She didn't look up. He dropped to his knees. "Mama, tell me this is a mistake. Tell me Amika didn't sell my house. Tell me you didn't spend all my money." She sighed, finally raising her tired eyes to look at him. "Philip, let me ask you. Did you ever send money with your own hands? Did you build the house with your own hands? You sent money, yes, but do you know what we went through while you were enjoying abroad?" Philip's mouth dropped open. "Enjoying?" He let out a bitter laugh. "Mama, I suffered. I worked day and night, went hungry, lived like a slave just to send you money." His mother stood up, dusting her hands. "Philip, you left us. We had to survive. Your brother needed a car. Your sisters needed to marry well. We used the money to take care of ourselves. You are a man. You can start again." Philip felt something snap inside him. "Mama, I was supposed to come home to rest, not to start over at 45. She clicked her tongue. "Then go back to where you came from." Philip gasped. His own mother had rejected him. After all the sacrifices, after all the years, would you ever forgive such a family? Philip's pain is just beginning. Keep watching. Philip stood outside his family compound, his mother's words echoing in his head. "Go back to where you came from." Tears stung his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. His mind raced. Where would he go? His house was gone. His family had stolen everything. He had no friends left in the village. After all, everyone thought he was a rich man now. Who would believe that the great Philip, who had sent thousands of dollars home, now had nowhere to sleep? Night was falling. The wind carried the smell of firewood and roasted corn, sounds of families laughing and eating together. Philip clenched his fists. He was once the provider for this family, yet today he was a stranger among them. He wandered through the village, his feet dragging. Finally, he found himself at the old abandoned schoolyard where he used to play as a boy. He sat on a broken bench, his suitcase beside him. He had spent 20 years dreaming of home, but home no longer existed. As the night deepened, hunger gnawed at his stomach and the cold bit his skin. He had never felt so alone. The man who had built houses for his family now had no roof over his own head. For the first time in years, Philip allowed himself to cry. Can you feel Philip's pain? Imagine coming home after 20 years and finding nothing. What would you do? Keep watching. The worst is yet to come. The next morning, Philip walked through the village, dragging his suitcase behind him. He could feel the stares, hear the whispers. That's him, someone muttered. They say he went mad abroad. I heard he came back with nothing. Philip clenched his jaw. Lies. These were the same people who once praised him when he sent money. Now they laughed behind his back. As he passed a group of men outside a small shop, one of them called out, "Philip, welcome back. I hope you brought plenty of dollars for us." Philip stopped. He forced a smile. I came back home expecting to rest, but my own family betrayed me. The men exchanged glances. One of them chuckled. Philip, you don't know how things work here. You left your wealth in another man's hands. What did you expect? Philip's hands trembled. They were my family. Another man shook his head. Blood means nothing when money's involved. Philip's chest tightened. He had believed in family. He had trusted them. But now he realized he had been a fool. Philip trusted his family, but money changes people. If you were in his shoes, would you fight back or walk away? Keep watching. The truth will break you. Philip sat under a tree near the village square, his head in his hands. The sun burned hot on his skin, but the coldness in his heart was worse. He thought about his life, how he had worked like a slave abroad, sent money home without fail, trusted his family blindly. And now he had nothing. His younger brother, Emeka, drove past in a brand new car, music blasting. He parked in front of a shop and stepped out, laughing with friends. Philip felt his stomach twist. That car, he had paid for it. That life, it was supposed to be his. He forced himself to stand and walk toward Emeka. We need to talk, Emeka smirked. Philip, why do you look like a beggar? You just came from abroad, Abi. Where is your wealth? Philip ignored the mockery. I want my money. I want my house. Emeka laughed. Your house? You mean our house? The one I sold to feed this family while you were enjoying abroad? Philip's fists clenched. You stole everything from me. People were starting to gather, watching. Emeka shook his head. Brother, let me give you some advice. Forget the past. You're a man. Start again. And next time, don't be foolish enough to send money without proof. Philip's vision blurred with anger and pain. He had trusted the wrong people. What would you do if your own brother stole your life? Would you fight or walk away? Keep watching. Philip's battle is just beginning. The village elders called a meeting. Philip had gone to them, hoping for justice. He sat before them, his voice shaking as he explained how he had worked, suffered, and sent money home, only to return and find nothing. The elders listened. Then, one of them, an old man with a white beard, sighed. Philip, we understand your pain, but your family did what they had to do. Philip's heart pounded. They stole from me. Another elder cleared his throat. Did they really steal, or did you give them the money willingly? Philip's mouth dropped open. I trusted them. The elder nodded. And that was your mistake. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Philip looked around in shock. They weren't going to help him. They weren't going to punish Emeka or his mother. They saw him as a fool, a man who had worked hard and let himself be used. Tears burned his eyes. He had fought to survive abroad, but here, in his own land, no one was fighting for him. Imagine begging for justice and being laughed at. What would you do if everyone turned against you? Keep watching. Philip's pain is not over. Philip returned to his mother's house, his hands shaking with frustration. Mama, why? His voice cracked. Why did you let them do this to me? His mother barely looked up from where she was sorting beans. Philip, stop making noise. We did what was best. Philip's breath hitched. You let my brother take everything. You let me suffer. She finally turned to him, her face hard. You sent money, but you were not here. Emeka was here. He took care of me. He handled things. What did you expect? Philip's knees weakened. Mama, I worked for you. I sacrificed everything for you. She shook her head. And did I ever beg you? You chose to suffer. You chose to send money. Philip felt something in his chest break. His own mother had never loved him. He was nothing more than an ATM to her. Is blood truly thicker than water? Could you ever forgive such betrayal? Keep watching. Philip's suffering is not yet over. Philip had spent his entire life making sure his family never lacked, and now for the first time in years, he had nothing to eat. He sat outside an empty shop, watching people pass by with bags of food. His stomach growled loudly, but there was nothing he could do. A little girl selling roasted corn passed him. She stopped, looking at his worn-out clothes, his tired face. Uncle, do you want corn? She asked softly. Philip nodded. But I have no money. She hesitated, then broke one in half and gave it to him. Take. Tears filled Philip's eyes. A small child, a stranger, had more kindness in her heart than his own family. He chewed slowly, each bite heavy with pain. The man who once sent thousands home now had to beg for food. If you were in Philip's shoes, what would you do? Keep watching. The worst is yet to come. Days passed. Philip had no home, no food, and no one to turn to. People began to whisper. He's mad. He talks to himself. I heard he was cursed abroad. He wandered the village, lost, broken. His hair grew rough. His clothes became dirty. People who once respected him now avoided him. One day, as he sat by the roadside, a man approached. Philip! Philip looked up. It was an old friend, Henry. I heard what happened, Henry said. I have a small place in town. It's not much, but you can stay there while you figure things out. Philip stared at him, shocked. After all the humiliation, someone was offering him kindness. For the first time in weeks, hope flickered in his heart. In the midst of betrayal, a stranger showed kindness. Would you accept it, or would pride hold you back? Keep watching. Philip's story is far from over. Philip followed Henry to a small one-room apartment in the town. It was nothing compared to the houses he had built for his family, but at least it had a roof. The moment he stepped inside, he broke down in tears. Henry patted his back. Philip, I know what happened to you is painful, but you are still alive. You can rise again. Philip wiped his eyes. Henry, I have nothing left. Henry sighed. That is not true. You still have your hands, your legs, and your brain. You were smart enough to make money before. You can do it again. Philip's heart ached. Could he really start over? That night, as he lay on a thin mattress staring at the ceiling, one thing became clear. If his own family had turned their backs on him, he would prove to them that he didn't need them to survive. When life knocks you down, do you stay down or fight back? Philip has a choice to make. Keep watching. His journey is not over yet. The next morning, Henry took Philip to a local construction site. It's not much, he said, but they need strong men. You can start small. Philip's pride burned. He had once sent millions home. Now he was being offered a job carrying cement. But then he remembered his empty stomach. He had no choice. The work was hard. Under the scorching sun, Philip carried blocks, mixed cement, and dug trenches. His muscles screamed in pain, but he refused to stop. The other workers mocked him. See the man who just returned from abroad doing labourer work. Philip ignored them. He had a goal, to rise again. At the end of the day, he was paid a small amount, barely enough to eat. But for the first time in months, the money in his hands was truly his. Philip is starting over from nothing. Would you have the strength to do the same? Keep watching. His comeback is just beginning. Weeks passed. Philip worked harder than anyone at the construction site. His hands became rough, his muscles grew stronger. He never complained, never begged. One day, the site manager, Mr. Aid, noticed him. "You are different," he said. "You work like a man who has something to prove." Philip only nodded. Mr. Aid smiled. "I like that. I want to promote you. How would you like to be in charge of a small team?" Philip's eyes widened. "Me? Yes. You have leadership skills. I can see it." Philip swallowed hard. For the first time, someone believed in him. That night, as he sat in Henry's small apartment, he whispered to himself, "I will rise again." Philip's story teaches us that no matter how hard life knocks you down, you can always rise again. But will his family regret what they did? Keep watching. Karma is coming. One evening, as Philip returned from work, tired and sweaty, he found a familiar face waiting for him, his younger sister, Carissa. She looked uncomfortable. "Philip, Mama is sick." Philip's heart twisted. "And what do you want me to do?" Carissa hesitated. "She's asking for you." Philip clenched his fists. The same mother who threw him out? The same mother who told him to go back to where he came from? He took a deep breath. "I have nothing to give." Carissa's eyes filled with tears. "Philip, please, she's still our mother." Philip looked away. After all the pain, could he still find it in his heart to forgive? Would you forgive a mother who betrayed you, or would you let her suffer? Keep watching. Philip's decision will shock you. Philip finally agreed to see his mother. When he arrived, she was lying on a mat, weak and thin. She looked up at him with teary eyes. "Philip, my son." Philip remained silent. She coughed. "I made a mistake." Philip's heart pounded. He had waited years to hear those words. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "Emeka and your sisters abandoned me. They took all the money and left." Philip sighed. He had seen this coming. His mother reached for his hand. "Please, forgive me." Philip felt a lump in his throat. He had every right to walk away, but instead he whispered, "I already did." Philip chose forgiveness, but will he ever trust them again? Keep watching. Karma is not done yet. Months passed. Philip continued to work hard. With Mr. Aid's help, he saved enough money to rent his own apartment. He even started a small side business. Meanwhile, his family fell apart. Emeka, the brother who stole his wealth, was now broke. The car was gone. The fake friends disappeared. One day, Emeka showed up at Philip's doorstep. "Brother, please, I need help." Philip looked at him, a wave of emotions crashing over him. "You need help?" he asked, shaking his head. "Where were you when I needed help?" Emeka looked down in shame. Philip sighed. "I will not let hatred consume me, but I will never trust you again." Emeka nodded slowly. He knew he had lost a brother forever. What goes around, comes around. Do you think Philip made the right choice? Keep watching. The final lesson is near. Philip was no longer a broken man. He had built himself from the ground up. One evening, Mr. Aid called him into his office. "Philip, I'm retiring. I need someone to take over." Philip's heart pounded. "Me?" Mr. Aid smiled. "You have proven yourself. You deserve it." Tears filled Philip's eyes. He had lost everything, but now he had gained something better. That night, he stood outside looking up at the sky. He whispered, "Thank you, God. I am a new man." Philip's journey teaches us that betrayal is painful, but true strength comes from rising again. Years later, Philip had everything he lost and more. He owned properties, had a family of his own, and helped others who were struggling. One day, his mother visited him. She was old and weak. "Philip," she said softly, "I am proud of you." Philip nodded. "I didn't need your approval, Mama. I just needed my peace." She looked away in shame. Philip had learned the greatest lesson of all: blood is not always family, and family is not always blood. Philip's story is a lesson to us all. Never trust blindly, and when life knocks you down, rise again. What would you have done in Philip's place? Let me know in the comments.